Despite the fact that JD Martinez will not open the season on the MLB roster, the Mets have optioned Mark Vientos to AAA, and Zack has made the team. I'll talk about that series of moves on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, the New York Mets all but set their opening day roster on Sunday, and Mark Vientos will not be on it, which is pretty surprising news. Now, if you told me in 10 days after the start of the season that Mark Vientos wouldn't have been on the Mets roster, I completely would have understood why that happened. Because JD Martinez would come up and Vientos would get sent down in his place. Those two guys fill very similar roles. And I expected the Mets to give Mark Vientos a little carrot to start the season. Let him start in the big league club. Let him play the first 9 games, get 35 plate appearances, and at least we'll get to play on opening day and all that stuff because he is a former top prospect. He has spent a ton of time in AAA. And while I assumed he would eventually end up back there, I didn't get the sense in why the Mets would want DJ Stewart, for example, to be the DH on opening day. And we'll see what they actually decide to do with that position. We'll talk about that more in the next segment. But now Zack has made the team. Brett Baty has made the team. And DJ Stewart is competing with himself for the last spot. The Mets did not announce that officially because, and again, we'll touch on this a little more in the next segment, but if another team maybe cut somebody that the Mets like, they could always make a waiver claim and then Stewart could get sent down. But the bottom line here is they made the decision to not even allow Mark Vientos to start with the big league club. And here was the reasoning that David Stearns gave. He said, quote, as we looked at our roster construction, looked at some of our matchups earlier in the season, we just thought this made the right sense both for him from a playing time perspective and for our team at the major league level. So I was curious. Let's look at the matchups early on in the season. They're playing the Brewers to start. Freddie Peralta. Okay, maybe you didn't want Mark Vientos against a really good right-handed pitcher. Now, Wade Miley would probably be the number 2 in this rotation now, which shows you how much the Brewers have fallen off after trading Corbin Burnes and, of course, Brandon Woodruff going down for the year. But regardless, Miley would be a great matchup. The thing is, I think he's dealing with a little bit of an injury concern in camp. So he might have a slower start to the season, which would maybe mean Joe Ross or Colin Rea or Jacob Junis or DL Hall, who is a lefty. None of those guys, to me, immediately profiles as a bad matchup for Mark Vientos. So then I go to the next series. The Mets will be playing the Detroit Tigers. I imagine Tariq Skubal will have already pitched. Kenta Maeda, Jack Flaherty, maybe those guys are the top 3 in that rotation. So if that is the case, maybe you're facing Casey Mize and Reese Olson. Those aren't extremely established big league starters that I would look at on the surface and say Vientos can't face up against those guys or can't match up well against those guys. And then, maybe you see Skubal in the final game of that series, which is a very, very tough matchup, but a lefty. They look at the Red Series. Could it be Hunter Green? I think Frankie Montas got the opening day start, so I imagine he would have started twice by this point. So could it be Hunter Green, Graham Ashcraft? Those are potential guys who could start against the Mets. But then they also have Andrew Abbott and Nick Lodolo, who are lefties. So you can't just say the Mets aren't going to see any left-handed pitching in those first 3 series. As much as you could say it's the matchups, really to me, this is a guy that just did not make the team. It's that simple. The Mets did not like what they saw from Mark Vientos this spring. Hey, they signed JD Martinez. That's part of the proof in that. But really, they didn't like him enough to even allow him to start on opening day. They feel like giving those at-bats to Zack Short is a better use of their roster early in the season. That's what this tells me. That when they face a lefty, the lineup could be something where Zack Short is playing third base instead of Brett Baty. And maybe you have, Tyrone Taylor, Harrison Bader in the outfield, and Starling Marte's DHing. And so if in those games you wanted Zack Short, if he wasn't going to start against those lefties, and then you say, all right, well, should he start against the righties? Maybe they ultimately decided for the first 9 games of the season, they would have got just as good a production with DJ Stewart than Mark Vientos. And while I could argue the other side of that Vientos can run into some home runs and that could swing some games early, they might have just felt like it was worthwhile to rip off that Band-Aid, clear him from the roster, clear that conversation as well. Will they, won't they? What are they going to do? They just make the decision now. And DJ Stewart can be that placeholder because, look, JD Martinez could make his season debut on April 7th against the Cincinnati Reds in Cincinnati. If he wants to hit in that ballpark, maybe he does choose to fly out for that game. I think it's more likely that we see him make his debut in Atlanta against the Braves in a 4-game set, and the Mets would want him there for that. I think he'd want to be ready to help in a series such as that. So it would be 9 games that DJ Stewart would be part of the roster until then, the first 3 series. And he has an option. He's on the 40. Makes more sense than adding G-Man Choi to the roster just for a 3-game series or 3 different series to start the year. Choi has accepted an assignment to Syracuse. So ultimately, I understand why the Mets did what they did. And as much as I love the idea of getting to see Mark Vientos for 9 games, you look at his camp and it's hard to argue for Mark Vientos having earned a spot on this team. You could say he hit 5 home runs. He hit a 795 OPS. That's okay. But what did he do when it comes to strikeouts? You look at the entire picture. He struck out 19 times in 56 at-bats and only drew 2 walks. That is a strikeout rate of 32.7% and a walk rate of 3.4%. As much as DJ Stewart has struggled, and I think his OPS might still be in the 500 somewhere, you look at his on-base percentage, he's getting on base at a 360-plus clip here. He's drawing his walks, and yes, the numbers might not be there. He might not have hit 5 home runs, but I'm sure us just looking at the stats and watching the spring games that were televised, we can't see the entire picture. We don't know how DJ Stewart was faring anytime there was a backfield that he got an at-bat in, and how he just looked in the box, how comfortable he was. And if the Mets just felt like, all right, if our DH platoon to start the season is some combination of Zack Short and DJ Stewart, we're going to get major league quality at-bats that we can hang our hat on. Also knowing that Tyrone Taylor can get some more at-bats. You can play him and Bader next to each other with Marte at DH. Marte can DH and Jeff McNeil can slide out to right field while Zack Short plays second and gives you a well above average second base. Or, of course, the other games where there's a lefty, having Zack Short not only in the lineup against left-handed pitching, but playing third base defensively was probably more attractive to them. So ultimately, when you look at this roster decision, and that's what we're going to discuss more in the next segment here, Zack Short beat out Mark Vientos for a job. And that's going to hold true throughout the early parts of this season, as he's going to complement a roster with JD Martinez and also complement Brett Baty at third base a lot better than Mark Vientos would have. So that's what I want to talk about next, why Zack Short made this team. So we'll get into that a little bit. It's a really great story. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. This is also a time where you can bet on MLB futures before the season starts. So if you want to bet on the Mets over under win total, last I saw was at 81.5. You can do so. If you want to bet on Pete Alonso to hit his over on home runs of 41.5, or if you want to just place a bet on the Mets to win the World Series at plus 5,000 odds, you can find all that at FanDuel. But remember, place that $5 bet first on a tournament game, where if you win that bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Now, Zack Short was not the only player the Mets announced had made the opening day roster on Sunday. Brett Baty also made the team. And if you want to get this signed photo of Brett Baty, all you got to do is become a Locked On Mets insider to be entered for a chance to win. This week, I'll be sending out the details on Wednesday to our insiders about how they can get the signed photo of Brett Baty. So if you want to be part of the giveaway, make sure you subscribe before then. You can find the link in the episode description. Or go to subtext.com/lockedonmets. And this is our texting service throughout the season, where you get updates from me anytime something breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. It's also where we will be sending out the lineups each day of the regular season. So you get the starting 9 texted directly to your phone. Again, you can find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/lockedonmets. Let's now discuss Zack Short making this team. A really awesome story. Grew up a Mets fan, native New Yorker, who did not have the most likely chance to make this team. As soon as the Mets picked him up, or maybe it was right before it, in the offseason, the Mets had acquired Joey Wendell through free agency, a 1-year, $2 million deal, and then they picked up Zack Short off waivers. Those two guys are very similar players in the sense that they're defensive-minded utility infielders. So Zack Short seemed to be the last man on the 40-man roster, a guy that most likely would be DFA'd at the end of camp. But he earned a job. You look at what he did after the first 3 games. First 3 games of camp, he goes 0 for 6 with 2 strikeouts. From that point on, February 29th, up until now, he has hit 12 for 33. That's a .363 batting average. He's drawn 7 walks to 4 strikeouts. That is a 17.5% walk rate and a 10% strikeout rate. His on-base percentage is .475, has 4 doubles and a home run. He also added going 3 for 3 on stolen base attempts. He's a plus defender at 3 positions in the infield, at second base, shortstop, and third. And then you look at what he did against lefties. Went 7 for 14. That's a .500 batting average with 3 of his doubles. He made some swing adjustments this offseason, as David Stearns described, that have paid real dividends for him. He focused on himself this offseason, just controlled what he could, and earned this. And David Stearns said it. Zack Short is a major leaguer. It was just a matter of who he'd be a major leaguer with. If they DFA'd him, he was going to latch on somewhere else, and he would have made a team, and he might have put up some really good numbers. And there's a chance that the Mets did find a diamond in the rough here. He's only 28 years old. Some guys, it takes longer than others. And he might just start a really great career. At one point in time, Justin Turner was non-tendered from the Mets, ended up latching on with the Dodgers. I'm sure there was a spring training where everyone was wondering if Justin Turner would make a team, and he turned in an incredible run with the Dodgers. Not setting an impossibly high bar for Zack Short, who might not even get that much playing time this year. We still don't know. So I'm not saying he's going to be Justin Turner. But what I am saying is oftentimes we are too quick to count a player out. If a player is not a top prospect and they had some bad MLB numbers, we just discard them. We set them aside and say, yeah, they're not ever going to be good. But this is a guy that's been grinding at this sport for a very long time, that puts in the work, that brings a lot to a ball club. He does. He, again, can be a strong defender. He's a good base runner, can steal the occasional base, which is nice to have on this bench. They're not going to have a ton of burners necessarily on this team. Obviously, some of them are in the starting lineup with Starling Marte, who will swipe some bags. Harrison Bader can swipe some bags. But again, there's not that guy that you want to come into the game to steal a base. And that might not be Zack Short either. But let's just say eventually when JD Martinez comes up and he gets a base hit in the 8th inning, well, Zack Short can run for him. And he can go first to third on any single, and he can score on any double. So there's a lot that he can bring to a team as one of those last guys on a bench. And he really went out and earned it, and you have to reward him for that. Now, also, we found out when he was talking to the media today that this same day when all this went down, that he got the news, his grandmother had passed away. He learned about it a couple hours before that. So to see him sort of get choked up a little bit talking about that, how much it means for him to make not only a team for opening day, which he's never done yet in his career. He did spend a ton of time with the Tigers last year on the big league roster, but he did not make the team out of camp. So it's the first time he ever did that. I got to share that news with his family. And it's not just he made a team, he made the team that his family roots for. And so it's a really cool story. I'm sure he's going to have all the butterflies when he gets into a game at Citi Field over this first couple of series. And again, if you are looking at whatever lefty ends up, on the slate for the Mets in these first three series, and you thought we want Zack Short to start those games, and then even moving forward, I imagine that's going to continue. Even when JD Martinez is up, he'll be the DH, of course, when lefties are on the mound. But I can see Zack Short still platooning with Brett Baty. And if Brett Baty's not hitting and Zack Short is, you never know. I am not going to say here on March 25th that Zack Short will be the starting third baseman for the Mets by midseason. I'm not going to go that far because I'm in love with some spring numbers. But there is a non-zero possibility that happens where Brett Baty falls off, and you don't want to see it. You want to see Baty really grab and claim that job and not let go of it for years. But if Brett Baty turns into a disappointment too, this could be one of those guys that surprises us and turns in a really nice season. In which case, if you had to ask me who I'd be more interested in seeing what they had to be, a little bit more of a larger role player at third, Zack Short or Joey Wendell. Short makes a lot more sense to me because he also complements the incumbent of Baty a lot better, being a right-handed hitter. So right now, I think that role is just going to be start against lefties and play third base, be a defensive replacement, that type of stuff. But he absolutely earned that opportunity with a great spring. And I'm excited to see what he does. And as far as DJ Stewart as that last spot, David Stearns did mention that the Mets could add somebody else. I don't think that means signing Tommy Pham. I think that means, hey, if the right player gets cut that they want to pick up, maybe the Mets will make a move. More likely, though, DJ Stewart will grab that last spot, and he will be the placeholder for the first 9 games of the season until JD Martinez comes up. And then that'll be your team. It'll be, of course, Pete Alonso at first, Jeff McNeil at second, Francisco Lindor at short, Brett Baty at third, Francisco Alvarez catching with Nimmo, Bader, and Marte in the outfield. Tyrone Taylor, your first outfielder off the bench, your fourth outfielder. Joey Wendell and Zack Short give you that versatility in the infield, and one's a lefty, one's a righty. And then you got Narvaez as the backup. That's the team. I think it's a good team that's got a lot of depth and versatility to it. They might be a little bit light on the bats off the bench, but again, if some of these guys carry over their springs, particularly Wendell and Short, you never know. They might be able to have a pretty nice bench as well on top of it. Also, I will say the Mets are going to carry the pitching conversation up to the very end here with Yohan Ramirez, Shawn Reed, Foley, and Michael Tonkin. The three of them can't make the team, though. There's a limit on the amount of pitchers that you have. It has to come down to the two of them. They can't just not have DJ Stewart make the roster and allow all three pitchers to make it. So it will come down to two of those three making the roster. I'll talk about that, and also Luis Severino putting a great cap on a fantastic spring on Sunday. So we'll go through all of that pitching stuff in the final segment. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. And Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels, deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date all the latest in the world of sports. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Luis Severino closed out his great spring training on Sunday with 5 strong innings, gave up just 1 run on 4 hits and a walk, struck out 4, got up to 73 pitches thrown. This was the best spring of Luis Severino's career. He made 4 starts. He allowed 2 runs in 14 innings pitched. That's a 1.29 ERA. He struck out 12 and walked just 1. That was in this outing today. He had not walked a batter in his previous 3 starts. And also, I'd like to note that each start he added an inning. So this is sort of perfect from the health perspective here. He goes from 2 innings to 3 innings to 4 innings to 5 innings pitched. I think that's really how they were breaking this down, which to me means first start of the season, second game for the Mets here when Sevy's on the mound. I imagine they have 6 innings out of him if he's throwing the ball well. And then, he obviously continued to be able to add to that pitch count. Again, he only threw 73 pitches in this game, but that's all he needed. He's been very economical with that pitch count. I imagine he probably has 80 to 90 pitches in him in his first start. I don't think he's going to have 100 just yet, and they might take some time to ramp him up to that level, but he is really throwing the ball well. And in this last start, he was averaging 96 on the fastball. He got 10 whiffs on 17 swings. So guys are not able to touch that pitch right now. That's always been Severino's bread and butter, being able to throw that gas. And if he's got that back in his arsenal and he's not tipping his pitches and he's able to effectively control that velocity and not just live over the heart of the plate too much, he's working ahead in counts instead of behind and putting him in bad situations, there is still a frontline starter here. If he can do those things and if he can stay healthy, I'm not going to take just spring results and say, oh yeah, he's back. He's an ace. But he did nothing this spring to leave any doubt that he has a chance to be that guy again. He really looks good. And it's clear right now, Jose Quintana can have the opening day start. Luis Severino is the ace of this team until Kodai Senga comes back. And there was a point this spring where all the guys in camp looked good, and that's not how things finished. Tyler McGill got another start as well as a split squad on Sunday. So he started one of the games. He gave up 3 runs on 3 hits and 5 innings pitched. He walked 2, struck out 7, which is nice. But you look at his camp overall, he started much better than he finished. He walked 2 batters in his first 4 starts. He walked 4 batters in his last 2 starts. He gave up 7 runs in those last few outings there, and his ERA ends up at 3.92. He still struck out 23 batters in 20 2/3 innings pitched. His whip was just over 1. It was a good camp, but still overall, an ERA close to 4, not quite as good as the 1.50 ERA he was sporting through the first 4 outings. Jose Quintana finishes camp with a 6.19 ERA, also not great. Adrian Hauser, 5.25. Shawn has been pitching better as camp has wore on, and he's got his last start on Monday here. So he's going to face the Yankees in what I would imagine is a dress rehearsal game. So I'm hoping he's going to see Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, all those guys, and let's see how he fares. If he can have a really nice outing against a good lineup, I think that's going to make us feel a little bit better about this rotation going into the season. But there's some doubts. There absolutely is. And I do like the depth on this team overall. I like Jose Budo as a 6th man. Of course, if they ever decided to go to Christian Scott or Mike Vassell early, I think they could fare pretty well this season. But I will tease you a little bit about tomorrow's show. We're going to talk Jordan Montgomery one last time because the Mets already negotiated 1 late deal with Scott Boras. Maybe they can get in on another, and that's assuming that J Mont does not sign before I record tomorrow night. Let's go through the bullpen options, though, because we finally saw Shawn Foley back on the mound. He missed a couple weeks with some bicep soreness. Finally got in for a Grapefruit League game, and it didn't go well. He walked the leadoff man, gave up a single to the next guy, then a double that scored those 2 runners. In the first 2 at-bats, though, he threw 15 pitches to those batters. Only 3 of them were in the zone, so he was pretty wild. He then lived in the zone against Sanchez, and in an 8-pitch at-bat, Sanchez eventually made him pay to hit that double. He was pulled after throwing 23 pitches to those 3 hitters without recording an out. Not a great outing. Now, Shawn Foley was spotless through his first 4 outings before the bicep soreness. He had 7 strikeouts to 1 walk, had not allowed a run. So we'll see what happens here. Not the best final note to your spring, though. And I would wonder Is there enough going on in his arm that they can put him on the IL to start the season? Phantom IL is, of course, a hot button topic as it relates to the Mets with Billy Epler's 1-year suspension. I don't think that David Stearns is going to want to get caught in those same waters. So we'll see. I don't think they can just put him on the IL because he's not pitching well and they want to keep him on the roster. But if you can prove there's still an injury there, that could be the easiest way to manage things, where Yohan Ramirez and Michael Tonkin make the team and Shawn Reed-Foley starts the year on the IL. That might still happen. Let's talk about the other two, though. Yohan Ramirez pitched on Saturday. He, too, was spotless prior to that last outing. Gave up 2 runs in 2 innings pitched, but he has pitched 2 innings in each of his last 3 outings. That's important to note. I am starting to think a little bit more about where this rotation's at to understand that Severino might not have 100 pitches from the start. Again, I don't know as well. Quintana, Minaya, are those guys stretched out to that length? With that in mind, maybe it makes sense to have both of the long men make this team. So that would be Yohan Ramirez, and that would be Michael Tonkin. Tonkin has not allowed a run in spring. He last pitched in a Grapefruit League game on Thursday, but I think he might have gone on the backfields once this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. It'd be interesting to see if both Yohan Ramirez and Michael Tonkin do pitch after Shawn Minaya on Monday, as sort of a last-ditch effort to impress before the start of the season. But going into that game on Thursday or going to Wednesday where they have to set the rosters, I really don't know where the Mets are going to go here. On my roster prediction episode, I predicted that Shawn Reed-Foley and Yohan Ramirez would make the team. But I also said if Michael Tonkin's split contract is not actually one in which the Mets can option him, that he would definitely make the team. The reason why I said Tonkin would not make the team is because I believe he could be optioned down on that split deal. With that in mind, though, I also think the Mets might just decide to DFA Shawn Reed-Foley and keep the 2 long men. Maybe they like the other depth that they have in their system. Nate Lavender could always come up at some point. They have other guys they signed to minor league deals that they might like that are going to be sitting there waiting in the wings. Maybe they will try to pass Shawn Reed-Foley through waivers here. We'll see. I think Yohan Ramirez is going to make the team. And of course, these predictions could end up being wrong, and all of a sudden it's Shawn Reed-Foley and Tonkin that make the team, and Ramirez doesn't, and I'm just completely off. But I at this point, I've been pretty consistent with this. I'm fairly confident Ramirez is going to be at least one of the 2 here. So we'll see who is that second reliever who grabs that final spot. Finally, last little piece of news here. Austin Adams was traded to the Oakland Athletics on Sunday for cash. Adams was the non-roster invite that really stood out the most during camp for the Mets. He led all relievers in strikeouts, but I imagine that there might have been a little bit of a handshake agreement that if he wasn't going to make the team and another team wanted him on their opening day roster, that the Mets would facilitate a move. He was on a split contract with them. So I'm thinking that's what happened here, and he ends up going to Oakland to be part of their bullpen to start the season. So good for Austin Adams. And unfortunate for the Mets because I would have loved to see him at some point this season. He does have some really good stuff. And at this point, the only way they'd see him is if things don't work out in Oakland and he ends up back on waivers. Regardless, though, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As I alluded to there, tomorrow's show, we're going to get into a little conspiracy theory on Jordan Montgomery. Also, throughout this week, I'm going to give you my top 10 bold predictions. I am going to give you 10 reasons to believe in the New York Mets this year. And I also want to touch on X factors. So I'll probably attach one of those topics to the Montgomery show tomorrow. Of course, recap the last game of spring as well. So a lot to discuss here, final couple days before opening day. I hope all of you continue to tune in throughout the week and throughout the season. If you're listening on the audio side, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to make a push to 9,000 subs right now, so I appreciate all of you who hit that subscribe. If you want to follow me on X, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. You can follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers everything in the world of sports. You can also find Locked On Sports Today on Amazon Fire TV channels with our local hosts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You can find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.